remember to buy a copy of your favorite books from the Cheeky Merchants. If we don't have it, we'll source it for you, but we'll definitely find the book for you.
Welcome to another episode of the Cheeky Natives. In 2025, Latlohanolo and I will do better. We actually will get a different intro. Latlohanolo, I think we need to just do something different. But I'm so excited, as usual, for the conversation that we're having. How are you, Advocate Simkhorwan?
I'm really tired, but also rejuvenated.
Response.
How much joy Cheeky Native brings me, and I said that you are a big part of that. I've had a really hectic 3 days in court, and so to sit here and speak about books, which I love, is completely amazing. How are you doing, Dr. A?
No, I'm okay. I'm alive. I'm grateful to be alive. I think it's been a tough and interesting week. I'm back to work with my 2 under 2 and the podcast and we give thanks. And so I'm excited for today's episode. I am so excited to speak to this author because, oh my goodness, I feel like this book was written for me. It feels like the book was written for them. So let's see. Hi, Onyi, how are you?
I don't want to say anything now because I'm here in doctor, I'm here in court, I'm here in 2 under 2. So it doesn't matter how I am. I'm in the presence of superheroes. So it doesn't matter how I am doing. You guys are like, you've already won. You guys have already.
I have the supreme pleasure to introduce today's guest, who is Onyi Nwabineli, a Nigerian British writer living in London. She's the co-founder of Surviving Out Loud, a fund that provides fiscal support for survivors of sexual assault, and the founder of Black Pens, a writing retreat for Black women. Her debut, Someday Maybe, was a Good Morning America Club pick. Her latest novel, Allow Me to Introduce Myself, is out now. Whoop, whoop. Welcome to the Cheeky Natives.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. I can't wait to get into this conversation.
You may get this question a lot, right? But there's always seems to be a sophomore curse, right? Like you wrote your debut novel and your debut novel did well. It was part of a pick of a really big thing. And did you feel some type of way when you were writing Allow Me to Introduce Myself and it ushering into the world? Was there anything about, oh my gosh, I don't know how it's going to be received?
I didn't think about in terms of, it's probably terrible for me to say as an author, but I didn't think anything about sales or even popularity in that sense. I did envision that there would be backlash, that people would not agree with much of the message behind the book. And do you know what? I was completely wrong because most of the feedback that I've had, people are really receptive to the message. But I have had a few people who I think felt personally attacked by the book, which makes sense. And that's fine. I welcome that kind of backlash and criticism. I have time to argue if I need to.
So I think speaking of the backlash, right, a lot of the book is around blended families. And I think we are constantly imagining what families look like outside of the nuclear ideas of family, right? And that you can be loved and mothered by people who may not be your biological parents. But Anuri's experience is a little bit different, right? Because much of her experience is colored by the experience of having to almost earn the approval of a non-biological parent. So there are ways in which there are navigations that you make, but children are incredibly intuitive. So she knows that this person loves her even when society tells her that she doesn't have to. And I wanted to speak about writing about the experience of having to earn what is typically thought of to be an unconditional relationship, right? Mother-daughter relationships are often lauded as being the source of unconditional love, and there is this person who will love you no matter what you do, but that is not the experience that she writes of. And I thought that was very interesting.
I love that you've brought this up because the relationship between Anuri and Ophelia is a very complex relationship. Ophelia loves that child and loves that girl, but the way I wrote her, it's not an excuse for the way that she behaved, but you can start to understand why she behaved in certain ways that she behaved. Their relationship is pretty complex because when she first comes into Kem's life, and Anuri's life, it's not based on, oh, let's see what I can get out of this. It's from genuine care. And then everything else comes later. So the love there is genuine. However, the nature of social media, the nature of the spotlight, the nature of living in a capitalist society where I can make content and that content can not only earn me money, but can earn me notoriety, it can earn me visibility, it can earn me a following. It's intoxicating to more people than would admit to it. And unfortunately, Ophelia falls under that kind of spell. And even though she's beautiful, conventional beauty standards in the West, she fits all of that. She's still not secure enough to feel like she can carry that content by herself. So she needs to bring somebody else in. And as we all know, kid content sells. So yeah, you are 100% correct that it becomes very transactional as time goes on.
What's also really interesting, I think, about the book is about mothers and motherhood. I suppose one of the things is to think about what it means to be a motherless child. Ophelia's own relationship with her mother and how that relationship, Bell Hooks often writes about how very primary caregiving relationships really impact how we show up in the world and in our adult selves. And I feel like Ophelia's relationship with both her parents, but particularly her mom, impacts the way she relationships with both her children, but more particularly Anuri. And I wanted to speak about like two components, right? This childhood trauma that prevents you from being the best mother, so to speak, but also what it means from Anuri to be a motherless child.
It's particularly painful when I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but we all know what the book's about. It's particularly painful for a child, even as that child reaches adulthood, to have lost a biological mother, never have had the chance to develop that relationship with your biological mother. And then your mother, who has made a conscious decision to love you and to raise you, also rejects you in different ways. And your father is useless. He's present only in monetary, he's present only in body. In everything else, he's tapped out. So the pain that Ari feels is that she's lost a mom twice and she's never really had a dad that looked out for her in that way. And I think that relationship, like, as you said, speaking about mother-daughter relationships, for Ophelia, Anuri's her first child, so Anuri's the eldest daughter, and you know the narratives around the eldest daughter narrative. But Ophelia has an expectation of what it's going to be like to be a mother, and that she will also be loved unconditionally, and her children will fall in line because she knows best, and so on and so forth. And again, she experiences a tacit rejection of herself and everything that she believes motherhood should be. So it's an interesting dynamic between the two of them because they're both deeply hurt and they're both deeply proud. And when the stubborn clashes with the stubborn, sparks fly all over the place. So, yeah.
I think what's also interesting about that dynamic is that there's the additional layer of race and race from different perspectives. So there's a perspective where Anuri is a Black woman who experiences being a woman and being in the spotlight in very particular ways, because we also know what it means to be a Black woman in the spotlight and the ways in which people weaponize that. But also she is a Black woman whose life experience is being commodified by a white woman, right? So there's an additional layer of race, but then the last layer of race is also that she's being raised by a father who has no intimate understanding of the racial dynamics, right? It's like a father for whom in his adulthood, that is the first time that he encounters the premises of race and the difficulties that come with race. And I wanted us to speak a little bit about why you chose to use race to the intersection of the power dynamics between these two women, but also between two generations. The first gen Brit, who is the daughter of an African immigrant, but also an African father who just really does not understand the dynamics of race in the way that his daughter does, right?
Yeah. So that's wonderful. I love this conversation. It's very interesting. When I was doing research for this book, I tell everybody that asks me where I got the idea and why I chose to write about this. I used to be a big consumer of mommy blogger content back in the day, like the early 2000s, when we're talking about the days of Deuce and all those the founders of the mommy blogger movement, right? I used to love that content. I don't anymore, but I used to love that content. And so I was like, okay, I have to think about the times that we're talking about. First of all, Income has uprooted his life and uprooted his child and moved to the West. He is now living in England. So the racial dynamic is going to slap him whether or not he chooses to acknowledge it. It's there, it exists, right? And it was interesting as well because when you start a blog back in the day with Blogger, so on and so forth, I remember that like I said, this wave of new mommy bloggers, they were all white. They were not, there was no really any faces of color. That came later, but they were all white and mostly American. That's what started the whole movement. And there was a look around mommy bloggers, usually blonde, usually aesthetically pleasing. Their houses were laid out in a particular way. This is what sold. This is why it became such a huge thing. And I had to, so for practical reasons, that's the first reason, practical reasons, if Income had chosen to partner with another Nigerian or another African woman in the West, this wouldn't have even been a thing because nobody would have been interested in the content. Mixed race content, especially when it involves children, is a huge seller. The white mom figuring out how to do her daughter's hair, trying different food from my husband's home, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, people love to see that for some reason. It's very interesting. And so Ophelia's Anuri's popularity depended on Ophelia's popularity. It's also very interesting because that extra layer of race and that power dynamic, as you've mentioned, is because Ophelia then is able to pull all the strings. She's able to dictate how this empire is built and how they move forward and how they navigate this new life that she basically has built for them on the back of a child. I just don't know that if this was when the original story started, which is back in the day, if it was a single race family that we would be having the same kind of discussions. It's not. Even all this kid content, so on, is way more recent back in our home countries now. It didn't start out back then. We've inherited that from the West.
We're taking a short break. We're taking a short break.
I normally don't fight so early into the podcast, but I'm going to fight. I really struggled with Nkem, right? I struggled with him for a number of reasons. I think one of the things that really made me mad is it felt like he relinquished his right to parent as a result of Ophelia. And I think you make an interesting commentary about what patriarchy does for men, because it effectively allows them to relinquish, right, and say, child rearing and nurturing is in the domain of the mother. I'm angry about that relinquishing, but I'm also angry at Nkem for just uprooting this child, right, from her home country. In African societies, we say that it takes a village to raise it, from that village, right? And then also, I think an interesting commentary you make about masculinity and patriarchy is that Nkem feels inept to deal with his grief, right? So I'm just mad. Let me just say I'm mad about Nkem. But I wanted to speak about the commentary that you were making with his character, because I think there were quite a number of things that he felt to be frozen in time as a result of the passing. And it felt that freezing in time was a relinquishing of all the responsibility with came to parenting Anuri. I often think about when people say he lost his wife, but she lost her mother as well. So the grief is different, but it's still there for the both of them. And it felt like he disregarded her completely and left her in Ophelia's domain.
Yeah. So you're 100% right to be mad at Nkem. And I'm so glad that more people are being very bold about saying that they really hate Nkem or they dislike him. Because he deserves smoke as well. Ophelia got a lot of smoke in the beginning when the book was just released. But I'm like, you're missing someone else. Someone else here deserves a bit of smoke. And that is Nkem. And you're 100% correct, because especially in an African culture, in different African cultures, I don't think it really matters where you're from in our wonderful continent. The ideas about how a house should be run, about how family should be run, about who should lead, about what it takes to be a man and a father, they're very interlinked and very similar across the board, across cultures. So Nkem buys into that. He's a very old school African patriarchal man, and you already know what that means. So you're 100% correct. He is devastated by the loss of Kainene. He does not know how to grieve properly, even though he's being offered help in the form of Makwa. Again, even his sister who lives in London is like, you should stay where you are and let this child have a support system. And he's, no, as my child, I'll figure this out. But in his head, figuring it out only goes so far as I'll put food on the table, I'll make sure there's a roof over our head. I now need to find someone that I can offload the responsibility, the emotional responsibilities to, the other practical responsibilities. She's a girl, first of all, so I'm not fit to deal with periods and hormones. I need to find somebody who will take on that responsibility so I can just put food on the table. And even when it becomes Ophelia and Anuri putting food on the table, or the majority of the food on the table, he's already checked out by then. And he does not know. And at the same time, as we've seen so many times when fathers have contributed nothing but money to children, when that child grows to resent them, they are shocked. And they're like, why does she hate me? Why does he hate me? They don't respect me. How dare they not respect me? And I'm really, no, actually, I don't respect you. I don't care what you have to say about my life. And I think that's a daunting prospect, because our men, they expect or they want to be respected above all. It doesn't matter how many times or in how many ways they have failed. And I think Nkem is a perfect illustration of that.
I want to speak a little bit about Nkem, because I think that, and this is not to excuse his behavior, because his behavior is absolutely atrocious and it's deplorable. But I think that there's a commentary that you make on grief, right? And the unfortunate realities that in like this capitalist society that we live in, but also in the nature of life continues. Your wife could have just passed away and you are expected to continue with the business of living. I feel like much of this book is also a meditation on the unfairness of grief, right? Nkem is grieving the fact that he has lost his wife. He's lost something that he loves so dearly. And even the way that he loves Ophelia is fearfully, right? He loves her, but with the space for her to disappoint him, whether it be by dying or just by being herself. He loves her with room for disappointment in ways that he didn't love Kainene, right? So even when things happened to Kai, so when Kainene, for example, had the miscarriages, etc., there's a very particular way that he interacts with that loss that you can feel Ophelia will never be able to access that part of his life.
Yeah.
I think much of this book is a meditation on grief, right, and on loss. And I wanted to speak a little bit about what adulting and being in that context looks like for the expression of grief, right? Because it is a little bit simplistic for us to just say Nkem is a horrible person, which he is, and he sucks completely. But there is a particular way that adulting demands of you that doesn't always make space for the expression of your grief, particularly when you have been withheld from the toolbox because of toxic masculinity and patriarchy and all of these things that disable the people in our lives.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. Someday Maybe is a complete, it just breaks down exactly what you said. In that story, Eve abdicates all her responsibility. She does not care. I'm grieving and I know what capitalism, I know what society demands of me, and I opt out, I refuse, and come and arrest me. That's basically what she does in Someday Maybe. And Kim is the opposite. As you've mentioned, there's a couple of things here. Yes, one, toxic masculinity, but I think, and I'm always an advocate for allowing people to grieve the way that they need to grieve, as long as it does not negatively impact others. You have a child, you have an infant, and if you are passing what it means to have lost a wife, which is devastating, nobody is taking that from you, and you're not in the best place emotionally, mentally, or physically to be an adequate parent at that time for that child, and you are having help, your people are offering to help you, to support you as you navigate what it means. These people are also grieving, mind you. Your wife's parents have lost their only child, and your child has lost her mother. So you're not alone in this, but people are still reaching out, helping hands to you. And it's that toxic masculinity, it's that pride that allows you to reject that in a way that I don't think, because again, it's different. This took place in Nigeria, right? We have so many problems, but what we do better than in the West is this concept of community. And he chose to remove himself from that community and isolate himself in a completely different continent. Yes, his sister was there, but she also had a life that he said, you know what, we'll figure it out together without even consulting her. And he completely disregarded her opinion because, man, there is a conversation to be had about giving him grace. And I think what I try to do in the novel is saying that he is not really in his right mind. So some of these decisions that he's making are because he's in the throes of grief. But how much of it is grief and how much of it is just boneheadedness because I know better than everybody else? I will leave that up to the reader to decide.
Yeah, I actually think that this is a great sort of way for us to segue into a conversation about what I think this novel does, which is a coming of age, but an interesting coming of age, because I think it's a commentary on how you can come into yourself at different points in your life. So we often think of coming of age as this very linear thing. You're a teenager, you go through adolescence, and now you are an adult and you're self-assured and you've never gone through anything. But the reality is that there are a number of people who experience almost a second puberty. So I think of young queer people who, because of queerphobia and everything that happens in their lives, are not able to come into the full expressions of themselves when their adolescent peers are doing that. And I think of Anuri, who grows up in the spotlight, who has her every move then dissected, and so is not allowed the grace and the space to come into herself. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to come into yourself when you've not had the regular childhood experience. The cost of your mistakes is a lot higher. Society is a lot less forgiving of somebody who is immature, who is figuring out lessons that everybody who's their peer figured out 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, which is a beautiful thing and a difficult thing because with Anuri, she is very fortunate to have a chosen family that accept her and have been there and have watched her journey and understand the intricacies of what it means to be her. She's a very messy person who believes that she's not messy, which is the worst kind of messy person. She thinks that she's got it figured out. She thinks she knows what's best for herself, what's best for her younger sister. I'm going to forge ahead. Even though she's in therapy, she doesn't always listen to her therapist. So she thinks that she's got everything figured out. And it's as you said, society doesn't really give you room to make mistakes. Even if you're just a nobody, people will cut you off. People are very individualistic. People don't really give space for mistakes. They don't give grace. They're just very much, you've done this and that's a boundary for me, so we're going to leave it here, which fine, that's their prerogative. But that is compounded when everybody knows your face, everybody is using your childhood pictures as memes and gifs and all that kind of stuff. You have no concept of privacy. You don't know what that means. You're also trying to navigate relationships for the first time. Even the friends that you have loved you since you were a child, you still feel like you must earn their love or you can't put a toe out of line, otherwise they will drop you. It's a very precarious place for somebody to be. At any point, she feels like the rug will be pulled out from under her and she will be completely alone again. And it's difficult because how do you come to a place where you can say, okay, I know who I am now and I'm okay with other people not accepting that? I don't know that too many people, fewer people than would admit it, get to that point. And if they do get to that point, sometimes it's not until they're like in their 40s and middle-aged or later even. Anuri's only 25. So to me, she's still a kid. She's still figuring it out. Even more of a kid because she never had a real childhood. She was working from the time she was an infant.
I think one of the beautiful things about allow me to introduce myself for me is chosen family or found family. For me, I thought, oh my gosh, like I left the book thinking, oh, at least something went right for Anuri in her life. I think particularly about her friendships, right, which I want to talk about because I think that they were quite pivotal in supporting her throughout this. 'Cause it's a lot for Anuri. But I also think that in many ways, I have a soft spot for Anuri's aunt. She's a typical, she's a typical African auntie. She will put you in the right thing, but she really did show up for both Anuri and her sister in ways that I felt were really important for Anuri, particularly because of what we said about Ophelia in terms of the commercialization of mothering, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I wanted to speak a little bit about that, about the importance of female bonds, so to speak, but also the importance of friendship and why it was important for you to explore that and give Anuri what I would consider a soft landing.
Number one, because for me, friendship is one of the most, this on a personal level, friendship is one of the most important things in life, right? Especially these days when we're seeing and it's not even a slow creep anymore. So it's a full on, we're hurtling towards fascism again. And we're just hurtling towards, again, being extremely individualistic. And it's this whole push again for the nuclear family, and you need to marry and you need to do this. And I'm just like, that's love. Like, I am a huge romantic, yeah. I love families, I love everything, but my friends are also my life. My partner can be my life. My friends are also my life. My family are also my life. And coming from a family dynamic that is just chaos and has been chaos even before she recognized what was happening. Her mom was gone before she even knew that she was really in this world. It was so important for me that, as you said, Anuri had a soft landing place. She knew that she could mess up and there would be someone there that still loved her and did not disregard her. She did feel like a burden to her friends. That comes up repeatedly throughout the book. But as Simi says, I don't keep you around for the good of my health. You actually pour into me and I actually love you and I need you. It's not a one-way street.
Girl, Simi, my girl.
Yeah. So that was really important. And then obviously, like as you mentioned also about Nelma, her aunt, my favorite character, I felt it was also really important to understand that, okay, my mom is gone and who should be my mom sees me as a commodity. I need somebody to guide me into womanhood. I need to understand. I need someone that helps me connect with my culture since my dad does not care and has just abdicated his responsibilities. And Norma is that person. She's okay, fine. Like, I told your dad, he doesn't want to listen, so come to me. I will show you what it means to know how to do your hair and do other people's hair, which is a huge part of our culture. I'll teach you how to cook. I'll make sure that you know our language. I'll make sure that you can communicate in our language. So you still have a tie to your grandparents as well, and you can speak to them in their language as well. She's such a hugely important person. And yes, she's brash, and yes, she's short, and yes, she's angry sometimes, but those are favorite aunties. Those are the most important aunties. She puts the tools in Anuri's hand. Number one, to earn money and sustain herself. Number two, to understand a little bit more about herself and what it means to be autonomous. And if she hadn't been there, I don't know what would have happened to that girl, honestly.
I love that because I think that it brings me to maybe the second part of that would be, I think a lot about how language is a tool for cultural preservation, and it's something that she speaks in the book. So there is a guilt that there's a scene in the book where her father hears her when he feels a guilt because here is yet another thing that I failed at. I think that there's also a very strong feminist choice in the fact that her aunt is the one that transmits the culture to her, as opposed to this man who's meant to be the patriarch and is meant to be the gatekeeper of the culture. It is the aunt who then is able to transmit the culture, the language, the sense of pride in herself. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the naming choices that she used in this book. People's names are chosen in a very particular way and have very particular meanings. There's something about the fact that, for example, Kainene has the name that she has and what happens. And now to speak a little bit about the choices that she made around names, but also around language in this book, because there is no glossary, right? So your readers either have to get with the language or contextualize it. And there's something so powerful about the language of choice being assumed to be the standard, right? The way that English books are assumed, right? Nobody puts a glossary to explain why somebody's named Samantha at the end of the book. And there's just something so subversive about doing that. So I wanted to speak a little bit about the choices you made linguistically as it relates to names, the choices around names, but also around not having, for example, a glossary of the terms in the book or translations.
I learn a lot from writing Someday Maybe, and especially since I have wonderful publishers in the UK and the US, but my US publishers tend to lead a lot of these conversations. And at first, I was like, okay, I'm writing for what was going to be primarily US readers, and they will not understand a single word of Igbo. They will not understand the significance of Anuri's name. I needed to make sure that this was conveyed in a way that made sense. And I went back and forth in Someday Maybe. I initially wanted to have a glossary. Glossaries I found are not really done in fiction novels unless they are fantasy or sci-fi or those kind of things that a lot of things are just completely made up and you'll need a glossary. So I was like, okay, that's not going to work. I'm not going to do inline translations because I don't like to assume that my readers are stupid. Google exists, and I know people will also reach out to myself and other the fellow Igbo people that they may know and ask about the significance, which is exactly what has happened. So yeah, I said, I learned with Someday Maybe, with Allow Me to Introduce Myself, I said there's not going to be footnotes and there's not going to be a glossary. So I will need to explain what these names mean. And it's, as you mentioned, income and so on and so forth, yes. But when I'm naming my female characters, especially, I take time. Ari's name was not always Ari, it was something else. And then I said, you know what? No, I need to think of a name that conveys how Kainene would have felt after she went through what she went through. When she finally is able to hold her child for the first time and unfortunately the last time, how would she have felt? I looked for a while and I said, you know what? This can just be very simple. It means joy. It means happiness. It means rejoice. That's exactly how the two of them would have felt. And as you said, Kainene's name, which is Let Us Watch, is, like I said, it's in the book, it's important. She's a central character in the book, even though that she's not there anymore. You'll never lose sight of Kainene, and you never lose sight of what she meant to the people that have lost her. She is a central figure in that book. And then you have the wonderful Nama, and you have the wonderful Makochuku, and these are just strong names. There's strong names for women who are integral to who Anuri becomes. Without these women, she's still figuring out who she is, yes, sure, but she would not be able to take up the fight in so many ways that she took up the fight in that book. That child did not rest. No, you're 100% right. It is so integral to me that I name my characters something that makes sense, that speaks to who they are. I live in London. I've spent the majority of my life in the UK, but I'm very Igbo. I'm very Igbo. And if I do not make sure that my Igbo-ness translates into every single thing I write, I will lose that part of myself, and I don't want to lose that part of myself ever. I want to stay in touch with my roots. I want to be able to speak and write the language. I want to be able to infer the traditions to the people, to my family members and to my friends who are interested. I want to be able to do all of that. And anything I write, you won't read the book and think this woman, you won't be in any doubt that this is an Igbo woman that has written the book. It's important to me. So it will always come out.
I wanted to speak what I think is a really important part of the book, or I suppose the premise in many ways about the book, which is this relationship between the loss, or rather the cost of the loss of identity and privacy, and just the opportunities that are afforded by the lifestyle of being a child blogger. Because we see the kind of push and pull, or the big tension in the book is that Ophelia is like, baby, I've gotten my riches from this. I ain't trying to let it go. And Anuri is, hang it up, baby. Hang it up.
Too bad, so sad. It's time to move on.
And there's a particular scene that kind of brings us to the fore, right? When we effectively find out that poor Anuri, unbeknownst to her, photos are all over in the world, right? And like all over, not necessarily in a good way. And I want to just speak a little bit about that, right? About what does autonomy for children look like in this time of children vloggers, right? Or mommy vloggers on behalf of their children. And we know that Ophelia's kind of intent in the beginning was to allow Anuri's grandparents and the families back in Nigeria to be a part of it, but it slowly became less about that and more about which brand can I work with. And I want to speak a little bit about that, right? This tension in the book about Anuri wanting to be her own person, but being her own person come as the cost of a failure, not living the luxurious life she's used to.
Yeah. So the research for this book was quite painful a lot of the time because it involved speaking to people that were gracious enough to give me their time and their stories that had grown up in this life. Now those babies are growing up and they have mouths to speak and they have hands to type and they have TikTok and they have Instagram and they're like, I will be able to tell my story outside of the narrative that my parents want to sell you. I'm allowed to talk now. And it was heartbreaking a lot of the time because these kids were, a lot of them, I won't say all, but many of them were effectively being emotionally blackmailed by their parents to say, if you don't do this, we'll lose the house. If you don't do this, we won't be able to do this. You won't have this. Mommy won't do. There's just a lot of emotional blackmail and manipulation going on. So autonomy is effectively removed and withheld from these children into teenagehood a lot of the time, because if we don't create content, then this lifestyle and this facade that we've built up will not be able to be maintained. There are very few protections for these children. California has just recently introduced a law that says that if children are used in content online, the money generated from that must be held in, or a portion at least of that money must be held in a trust for these children. Family vloggers are moving out of California in droves. And it's just a testament to where we are. At first, when I started out with this book, I said, you know what? I want to give all parents benefit of the doubt. I don't think that parents go into this with the intent to cause their children distress or thinking that money and visibility is more important and popularity is more important than the happiness or the welfare or well-being of their children. I was wrong. I was so wrong because unfortunately, there's a great number of parents where money and visibility and opportunity does outweigh their child's happiness and their child's well-being. It's not as if I'm a genius or something to be able to look up this research myself. It exists and it's becoming more prevalent and more mainstream. The New York Times ran a long form story on who it was that was watching the TikToks of little girls in particular. And they found 10 million faceless men leaving comments, just disgusting things that parents know. Parents know, but they choose to ignore because the benefits for them outweigh the negatives. And so unfortunately, autonomy for children is still, the protections are starting to trickle in, but especially now with the advent and the surge in things like AI, like these children, they're not safe and they don't have a say. And it's really quite heartbreaking and quite terrifying about what's ahead, because at this point, a child could opt out and then their image is out there forever. And at the same time, AI exists so that their parents can just supplement them with something that looks like them. It's really quite terrifying. And for you, Dr. Hannah, with two under two, like anyone with children, I'm just like, because I have a niece and nephew and I have godchildren as well. And I'm just like, they're probably sick of me. I'm always harping on about this. I'm like, you don't understand what's out there. You don't understand. You need to get your kids offline. Post it in the group chat. Don't post it on Instagram. What's the difference? It's just one of my hills that I'm willing to die on, because children are not a protected class. Adults feel like they own children. Parents feel like children are an extension of themselves. They think that they have the right to do whatever they want with their children. And it's really painful because it impacts them, often negatively. And we're not talking about it enough. Yeah. Let me get off my soapbox.
I was like, preaching.
Do you know, I was also just intrigued by the sex work that she does and the ways in which she partakes in sex work in order to reclaim herself. There is this loss of control because she's had her image splashed across everything, everywhere, etc., but also just had really intimate moments of her life. And it's made me cringe just thinking about how mommy bloggers will talk about, oh, today was my daughter's first period. There are things that are so intimate and sacred that Anuri has just thrown out into the domain for her mother to become more likable, but also for people to feel like there is this weird relationship, this parasocial relationship that exists. But then she does sex work.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity for her to, in some ways, have a reclamation of self, right? She's able to earn money. She's able to do things, but also to express herself in a way that I think as the oldest African daughter, she just may never, ever have room in her family to do. And I wanted to speak a little bit about why you chose to write Anuri's reclamation of self in this way.
Again, a lot of it is around circumstances because she's grown up the way she's grown up. Things like having a reasonable, and I didn't go into too much detail in the book, but readers are able to use their imagination. The way she's grown up, she's not able to have a quote unquote normal university experience, for example. Her going into a normal workplace is not something she's terrified of it. It's not something that's really viable in her mind. She needs another, but at the same time, she needs a way to sustain herself and she needs a way to make money, right? How can you do that? And this is often the case for sex workers. They're like, what is a way for me to make money where I can also be in complete control of how I am perceived again, like which she inherited from Ophelia, how I am perceived and how I engage with people. And this is why she chose financial domination. As you've noticed in the book, she doesn't meet any of her clients. She doesn't meet them in person. She chooses not to. She doesn't really show her face or anything like that. It's a very niche and particular kind of sex work that also pays big dividends if you manage to get the right pay pigs. And she has them. And again, I was very fortunate to actually speak to a few financial dominatrices. There you go. And they gave me a lot of insight into it. And it's fantastic. And I even got a bit jealous because I was like, wow, you guys are really like just insulting men for money. And I'm doing it for free, which is what Simi says as well. So yeah, absolutely. It's a reclamation of herself in that I call the shots here. Not only am I insulting people, which if you read the book, I won't give it away, but there's a conversation between her and her therapist that alludes to that as well. I'm insulting people. I don't have to meet them. This is 100% under my control and I can do what I want. That is a big thing because she's never had that before. And it also means that she can also do it from the safety of her own house. She does not have to be perceived in that way. She doesn't have to deal with coworkers. She can just be this person and say what she wants, and there's not really any backlash. That's a big part of her figuring out who she is. So, yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about her love.
Everyone's book boyfriend. Yeah.
And I'm a sucker for book perfect boyfriends. But I wanted to speak a little bit about him. I think their encounter or the way that they come into each other is really interesting because with Anuri's background, she's very guarded, right? But you can see that she kind of longs for something, but she can't allow herself to feel this particular thing because what are these men after? Are they after the man? Do they know who I am? Are they trying to have a Instagram power couple kind of relationship?
Yeah.
And for me, I find that he is surprising in interesting ways, right? He's also like
love.
How am I smiling? Are you?
It's in love. 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 Love.
And I wanted to know why it was important. Babes, I'm a romantic. So anytime when I feel like people are in love, I'm like, oh, that should be me.
I want to challenge Onyi a little bit in conjunction to what she's saying. The women in her book struggle with love. Because I think about Simi, they struggle to receive love. Simi, he's a good man, Savannah. He's a good man. And Simi just cannot. So there is like an aloofness there. It's just an interesting. I understand with Anuri why she interacts with love in the way that she does. Simi, the woman in this book, there's something about how even women who seemingly know how to have amazing relationships in their personal lives, even with men, right? Because they have a great friendship with Loki. They love Loki in their own interesting ways, but just struggle romantically. And Yuri, Simi, they're not giving. It's not giving what it needs to give, even though he's a good man.
So I'll do Simi first because we are forgetting that these are young people. These are 25 to, and Simi if you like, is the most normal of the three friends, right? Her parents are together. She lives with her parents. She has brothers. She's the eldest daughter again. She has a good example of what it is to be in love, right? So with her parents there, they are a quote unquote good couple, a blueprint couple, as it were. But she's young and she's gifted, and she's also been Anuri's best friend since they were like 5. So it's part of it is watching her friend go through an experience or not experience these things. Another thing is that she herself is figuring out who she is in romantic terms. Her and Anuri have decided that they're going to do life together. They're going to live together. They're going to be together. They're going to be each other's person, like Meredith Grey and Christina Yang in Grey's Anatomy. They're going to be each other. And so Simi feels as if she's betraying her bestie by falling in love or entertaining the prospect of falling in love, especially when before our darling Christian Chidley has made it very clear that she's opted out of that part of life. She doesn't want, she tried once, it blew up in her face, and she's, you know what, I'm fine. I will just, you, low-key, Simi, you're enough for me. That's okay. So Simi feels okay. She's decided that she's not interested. So if then I go, good man, Savannah, or otherwise, if I now go and fall in love and start having to split my time or split my life between my other love of my life and this new person, how's that going to work? It's just too much for her brain and her heart to contend with. So she freaks out. But that's where we see examples of Anuri being a good friend and be like, girl, what are you talking about? You're allowed to have a life outside of me. Like, it's absolutely fine. Anuri's a bit more complicated. She has no concept of what it is. She does not have any examples outside of Simi's parents of what it means to be in a healthy romantic relationship. She's dabbled. That hasn't gone well for her. And she's like, you know what, it's fine. So Christian he comes in like a wrecking ball almost. And the attraction is instant. And she goes back and forth in her mind and in her heart about it. And she's like, we cannot. And you see how she acts. I won't give it away, but at several points, integral, beautiful, romantic parts of the book, you see how she reacts and how she acts and how just so much of a mess she is, and how he's not the typical picture of what it means to be masculine in this society. He does things and behaves in certain ways that certain guys would be like, oh, I'd never. And he's tender-hearted and he's hurt by the way that she behaves, which I think anybody would be. So I absolutely adored writing their dynamic. I think it's so cute. And I think that the both of them, they're so sweet together. And it was a breath of fresh air being able to allow my central female character to be the one doing absolute nonsense over and over again. And having someone who may or may not give her grace continuously. It was a lot of fun.
I love that. No, I think I was going to say something similar to you. I love that you're saying that, because I often feel that men are given the latitude to fend off and be messy and not want to receive love and all of that. And women in particular, or more feminine femme people, are said to be people who are more easy to step into love. And so for me, it was really interesting to see that dynamic of these people who understand what it means to be loved. Simi and Loki, they got it down, right? They know what it is. But interesting to not be able to receive that in a different context. For Simi, it's a bit different because she feels it's a betrayal thing. For Anuri, she's like often like me. She's just, I'm not worthy. And she acts from a place of unworthiness in messy ways, as you say. So I love that. I love that she gave them that grace to be the people who were messy, when often we know that it's the men who are messy.
Yeah, to figure themselves out. These are 25, 26-year-olds. This might be the first relationship. They're figuring themselves out. They're like, okay, what do I want? Do I want a hoe phase? Do I want a serious relationship? Do I want to get married? They're figuring themselves out. And then you compound everything else Ari's been through on top of that. The girl was gonna make mistakes. So yeah, I think that, and it was important.
Highlights as well is that there is a privilege in the ability to make mistakes, right? There is a privilege in the ability to make mistakes and still have the people that you love in your life still want to be around you and still feel like they consider you a person to whom effort is owed to. But also to not have those things permanently change the trajectory of your life. And that's not a privilege that a lot of Black people, but particularly Black women get, right? The mistakes that Black women make completely change the trajectory of their lives because of all these systems in place and these injustices in place that root you to the site of your mistake, right? And so there's a way in which you highlight what a privilege it is to be able to make mistakes and still be around people who see you for the fullness of who you are. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing to see. But before we go, I wanted to talk about writing untidy and neat endings, right? There's a thing about endings, and we need to talk about these endings because I was just left, but what is this? What is it that Onyi is doing, right? Because there's a thing about how we want life to be neat and to wrap endings up. The endings in this book are extremely untidy. Like, you're just left thinking, oh, sister, is this good? Is it not good? I'm not sure.
I write endings the way I write endings because that's how life works, right? You don't always I'm still getting shouted at today. The book came out in 2022. I'm getting shouted at multiple times a day for how someday maybe ended. People are not happy with me at all. And I'm just like, in an ideal world, everything would be wrapped up in a neat little bow. And I think that's also how it would work if I was writing a romance novel. I'm not writing romance novels. I love romance novels, but I can't write them because I inevitably would struggle to make everything neat and beautiful and picture perfect at the end, because that's just not how life works. That doesn't mean that the endings are bad or necessarily even sad. They're just unfinished sometimes because we don't add, everything's not slotted into a neat box. Yeah, I'm not going to give away the ending of allow me to introduce myself, but I wrote it very deliberately that way. It was originally a neater ending, and I said, you know what, no, because what do we know? What have we learnt along the way about Ophelia? What have we learnt about Inkem? What have we learnt about Anuri? I'm not just gonna completely alter their characters in order to have a neat and happy ending. They are who they are. And I know readers will not always be happy with that, but that's okay. You can write your own ending. You can decide what happens after the book ends. You can decide. That is what I love. I like readers coming to me and be like, you know what? So after I finished your book, I thought that this might happen. And I'm like, that's fantastic to hear. And people are always asking me about sequels, and I'm not writing a sequel to either of these books. So please. It makes me smile a lot, but because life is complicated and increasingly complicated these days, I'm not always going to be able to write an ending that you maybe are desperate for. I'm just going to write a realistic one.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. As you can tell, we absolutely loved one of the questions that I have, because I feel you were quite passionate about this, is what do you hope the book does now that it's out in the world?
If it even touches one person, one parent especially, who has a child that is all over social media and makes them think, do you know, what am I doing? Maybe this isn't the best way to, even if it's from like a demonstration of love for your child, maybe this isn't the best way to demonstrate my love for my child. Maybe there are safer ways or better ways that I could do that. If that touches one person, or somebody, a child who is now a teenager or an adult, reads it and thinks this was my life, and somebody actually gets it. Somebody gets what I went through or what I was thinking and how I was feeling. That is the most important. Secondary to that, if it can get into the hands of legislators and they can actually do something, somebody in power, do something, give these kids some recourse, give them some protections, something if that would be a huge plus for me, because at the end of the day, I still feel very powerless outside of my writing because this is happening more and it's already out of control. And I just feel like there's so much more that we as the adults could be doing to protect these children, not just children we know, but all children. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Onyi. This was such a wonderful conversation, and I hope that you can tell that it came through just how much we absolutely enjoyed this conversation. I think that it, in many ways, altered how I feel about social media and my children, but it's also such a beautiful cautionary tale. And I think this is why people who deprive themselves of reading fiction are really depriving themselves of the opportunity to expand their worldview, but also expand their imaginations of what can and shouldn't be. So thank you so much. We absolutely enjoyed your book. We can't wait to see what the book continues to do. And we can't wait to see what you continue to do. So thank you very much from the Cheeky Natives. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you in South Africa one of these days.
Oh, I'm coming. Don't worry. I will be there. And I hope to meet you guys in person. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for connecting with the book the way you did. I love intelligent, wonderful readers. Get in there with the deep questions. I absolutely love it. So this has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, Cheeky Natives, until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Cheeky Natives. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and rate the podcast on all your streaming platforms.